When the story ends, we think we know how it ends. The great evil is defeated, the heroes return, and the world, scarred but saved, settles back into the familiar rhythm of seasons. And for the hobbits, the smallest of heroes, the ending seems particularly clear. We have a neat, almost archetypal summary of their fates. Frodo, the ring-bearer, bearing a wound that would never heal, sailed into the west, seeking peace in a land beyond memory. Samwise Gamgee, the steadfast companion, returned home, married his Rosie, had a sprawling family, and lived out his days as the beloved mayor of Michael Delving, the very picture of a life well lived. His reward was the Shire itself. And then there are the other two, Merry and Pippin, Meriadoc Brandybuck and Peregrine Took. We tend to lump them together, don't we? The two mischievous cousins, the comic relief who rise to the occasion, who become knights and heroes in their own right before returning to lead their prominent families. Their ending feels like Sam's, just a slightly more aristocratic version of it. They come home, they grow up, they take their places as the Master of Buckland and the Tyne of the Shire. They live long, prosperous, and respected lives. End of story. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Here is the detail. Buried deep in the appendices, in the quiet footnotes of the grand tale that complicates everything. Frodo sailed west because he had to. His spirit was broken. Sam stayed home because he was home. His heart was planted in the soil of the Shire as deeply as his own potatoes. But Merry, in the final years of his life, made a choice that was not forced by a wound, nor dictated by the simple comforts of home. He made a choice that, when you truly look at it, is one of the most quietly heartbreaking and profoundly human acts in the entire legendarium. In the year 63 of the Fourth Age, when he was 102 years old, an age of great reverence for a hobbit, Meriadoc Brandybuck, the Master of Buckland, received a message from Rohan. King Éomer, his old friend and shield brother, wished to see him one last time. And so Merry, after consulting with his friend Pippin, did something extraordinary. He handed over his titles, his lands, his responsibilities to his son. He said goodbye to his family, to the rolling hills of Buckland, to the Brandywine River, to everything he had ever known. And he left, and he never came back. Why? Why would a hobbit, a creature defined by home and comfort, do such a thing? Why would a hero who had fought so hard to save his home choose to leave it behind forever in the twilight of his life? I think this wasn't a journey into a mystical, healing land like Frodo's. This was a journey back to a place of war and grief and glory. To understand this choice, we have to understand that Merry's story doesn't just end with the Shire. In a way, it begins again, long after the pages of the main narrative have closed. We have to look past the cheerful hobbit who loves mushrooms and pipeweed and see the man he became. Holdwine, the loyal knight of the Riddermark. We have to understand that for some soldiers, the most profound and defining moments of their lives happen far from home, in a different country, speaking a different language. And when the war is over, they come back. But they never fully arrive. They leave a piece of themselves behind in the soil of a foreign land beside the graves of comrades. Merry Brandybuck came home to the Shire, but I don't think his heart ever truly left the windswept plains of Rohan. What we're about to uncover isn't just a piece of trivia from an appendix. It's the secret story of a hero's soul, and it asks a question that resonates with any of us who have ever felt the pull of two different worlds. Where, in the end, is home? Is it the place you were born, or is it the place where you were truly born? To grasp the weight of Merry's final choice, we first have to establish what we think we know. We remember Merry as the sharpest of the four hobbits, the one who actually had a plan. He wasn't just swept up in the adventure like Pippin or pulled along by loyalty like Sam. Merry was a conspirator. He organized the conspiracy to help Frodo, gathering supplies, studying maps of the Old Forest. He had an intellectual curiosity, a Brandybuck trait that made him more worldly than his friends from the outset. Throughout the early parts of the quest, he is the pragmatist, the planner. He knows the dangers of the world are real, not just stories. But even this worldly hobbit is, at his core, a creature of the Shire. His world is defined by comfortable holes, good food, and the intricate social tapestry of the Brandybuck family. His identity is rooted in Buckland, a place slightly wilder and more adventurous than the rest of the Shire. But the Shire nonetheless. His destiny, as far as anyone could see, was to one day become the Master of Buckland, to manage the lands and live a life of gentle, respected provinciality. The war was supposed to be an interruption, a grand and terrible detour before a return to normalcy, and for a time, that's exactly what it looks like. When he and Pippin are separated from the Fellowship, their journey takes them to Fangorn Forest and then to the Kingdom of Rohan. It is here, in the Golden Hall of Meduseld, that the trajectory of Merry's life is irrevocably altered. It's a moment that's easy to gloss over. In the midst of grand strategy and the looming threat of Isengard, a small hobbit approaches the beleaguered King Théoden. Moved by the old king's revitalization and his quiet dignity, Merry does something impulsive, something utterly un-hobbit-like. He offers the king his sword. He swears an oath of fealty. Think about what that means. This isn't a game. In this world, an oath is a binding, spiritual contract. Merry, a hobbit from a land with no king and no formal army, pledges his life and loyalty to a foreign monarch he has known for only a few days. He kneels, and Théoden, looking down at this small, strange creature, accepts. He gives him a new name in their tongue, Holdwine, loyal friend. And in that moment, Merry's identity splits. He is still Meriadoc of the Shire, but now he is also Holdwine of the Riddermark. This is the first piece of overlooked evidence. This oath is not merely a symbolic gesture. For Merry, it becomes the central anchor of his experience in the war. While Pippin goes to Gondor and swears service to Denethor, a cold and distant ruler descending into madness, Merry's bond is with Théoden, a man he comes to see as a grandfather, a true king. He says to him, "As a father you shall be to me." This is a deeply personal, deeply emotional connection. He rides with the Rohirrim. He wears their gear. He listens to their songs. He feels their sorrow and their hope. He is, for all intents and purposes, adopted by them. He is no longer just a tourist in the Great War. He has a side. He has a people. And then comes the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, the moment that will define him forever. Théoden, forbidding Merry to ride into a battle he believes will be certain death for the hobbit, essentially orders him to stay behind. But Merry, driven by this new, fierce loyalty, disobeys. He conspires again, this time with the shield maiden Éowyn, and rides to war in secret. This is where the story shifts from a tale of adventure to one of profound trauma and sacrifice. On that field of battle, Merry experiences the highest highs and the lowest lows of a warrior's life. He feels the exhilaration of the charge, the sheer awe of the Rohirrim thundering towards the armies of Mordor. He hears his king laugh in the face of despair, and then he witnesses the absolute depths of horror. He sees the Witch King of Angmar, the Lord of the Nazgul, descend upon Théoden. He is paralyzed by terror, the black breath washing over him, a fear so profound it's a physical force. But as the Witch King taunts Éowyn, something in Merry breaks. His love for his king, his adopted father, overcomes his fear. He does not think of the Shire. He does not think of his own safety. He thinks of Théoden, and he stabs the Witch King from behind, driving his enchanted Barrow-blade into the sinew of the creature's knee. That single, desperate act of courage creates the opening for Éowyn to strike the final blow. It is an act of heroism that changes the course of the battle and possibly the war. But the cost is immense. Merry collapses, his arm frozen, the poison of the Nazgul's presence seeping into his very being, and the last thing he hears before darkness takes him is the sound of Théoden, his king, dying. He helped save the day, but he could not save his king. This is the moment that sears itself into Merry's soul. The moment of triumph is inseparable from the moment of devastating loss. The physical wound Merry sustains is healed by Aragorn in the Houses of Healing, but the psychological wound, the complex alloy of grief, loyalty, trauma, and pride forged on the Pelennor Fields, is something he will carry for the rest of his life. He is now, and forever, the hobbit who helped slay the Witch King. He is the shield brother of the new king, Éomer. He is a hero of Rohan. This identity, earned in blood and terror and love, is now as much a part of him as his name. When he eventually returns to the Shire, he is celebrated. He and Pippin are taller, grander, carrying swords and wearing the livery of foreign kingdoms. They lead the scouring of the Shire, using the skills they learned in war to cleanse their home of Saruman's ruffians. On the surface, it's a triumphant homecoming. Merry takes his rightful place as the Master of Buckland. He marries Estella Bolger. He settles down. He does everything a hobbit hero is supposed to do. But look closer. Look at what he does with his long years of peace. He becomes a scholar, he writes books. And what are those books about? Herblore of the Shire, old words and names in the Shire, the reckoning of years. These are not the works of a man content to simply live in the present. They are the works of an archivist, a historian, a man desperate to understand and preserve the past. His study of Herblore is explicitly linked to his discovery of pipeweed in Rohan and Gondor. His study of language is connected to his fascination with the tongue of the Rohirrim, a language he found was related to the ancestral tongue of the hobbits. Everything he does, every intellectual pursuit, is a thread leading back to his time away. He is physically in the Shire, but his mind is constantly returning to the south. He is trying to build a bridge between his two worlds, to make them make sense together. He is trying to integrate the man he became, Holdwine of Rohan, with the hobbit he was born as, Meriadoc of Buckland. Think about what it must have been like for him. He would sit in his comfortable study in Brandy Hall, the peaceful green hills of the Shire stretching out before him, and in his memory he would see the Golden Hall of Meduseld. He would hear the horns of the Rohirrim. He would feel the earth shake under the charge of the horse lords. He would remember the face of Théoden, the feel of the black breath, the cold fire in his arm after he struck the Witch King. How do you explain that to your neighbors? How do you share that with your own children, who have only ever known peace? Samwise could share his story with his family, because his story was ultimately about his love for Frodo and his love for the Shire. It was a story that came full circle, ending where it began. But Merry's story didn't. A huge, vital chapter of his life took place in a world his fellow hobbits could never truly comprehend. He was a veteran, living among civilians who, for all their love and respect, could never understand the defining experience of his life. He was a living legend, but also a man profoundly alone in his memories. This is the uncomfortable question we must ask. Was Merry ever truly content in the Shire again? He was successful. Yes. Respected, absolutely. Loved, without a doubt. But was he at peace? Or did he spend 60 years feeling like a visitor in his own home? The Shire was the world he fought to save, but Rohan was the world that saved him, that gave him a purpose and an identity beyond anything Buckland could offer. The Shire was his past and his present, but Rohan was his moment of becoming. It was the place where he faced the ultimate fear and did not break. It was the place where he found a father and lost him in the same breath. It was the place where he became a hero, not of a story, but of a nation. And for 60 years he lived with the echo of that life, a ghost of honor and glory, haunting the quiet contentment of his hobbit hole. This is the deep, underlying tension of his long peace. He is a man of two worlds, trying to live fully in one while his heart remains tethered to the other. So, when that message arrives in the twilight of his life, it is not just a summons from an old friend. It is a call home, not to the home of his birth, but to the home of his soul. King Éomer of Rohan, now an old man himself, wishes to see his friend Holdwine one last time. For 60 years, Merry has been the Master of Buckland, but the message isn't for the Master, it's for Holdwine. It's a reminder of the other man he is, the man he became on the fields of Pelennor, and Merry's response is immediate. He settles his affairs, he gives up his title, his land, his power, he chooses to answer the call. He and Pippin, his one remaining companion who truly understands, travel south together one last time. They leave the green peace of the Shire behind. They ride out of the world of hobbits and back into the world of men. This decision is the pivot on which Merry's entire life story turns. Let's contrast it with the other hobbits. Frodo's departure was a necessity, an act of seeking healing for a spiritual wound that was killing him. He didn't have a choice. Not really. The Shire was no longer a place of peace for him. It was a place of ghosts, a constant reminder of the ring he had borne. His journey was one of mercy. Sam's choice was to stay. He was the ultimate homebody, the embodiment of the Shire's spirit. His reward was to see the good in the world he had fought for, to nurture it, to watch it grow. His journey was one of contentment. Merry's choice was neither of these. He was not broken like Frodo. He was not rooted like Sam. He was something else. He was a man with a divided heart. His choice to leave was not an escape from pain, nor was it a rejection of the Shire. It was an embrace of the other half of his identity. It was an admission, after 60 years of trying to be one thing, that he was also, and perhaps more fundamentally, another. Imagine that final departure, an old hobbit, over a century old, saying goodbye to his children, his grandchildren. They would have begged him to stay. Why leave? You are the Master. This is your home. Everything you could ever want is here. But he would look at them, and in his eyes they would see a distance, a longing for a windswept hill under a grey sky, for the sound of horses and the fellowship of a shield hall. He wasn't leaving what he didn't love. He was going toward what he loved more. Or perhaps what he felt defined him more truly. He was answering the call of the oath he swore so long ago. An oath to a king who was long dead, but whose memory had shaped his entire adult life. He was going back to be with Théoden's people. He was going back to be Holdwine. When he and Pippin arrive in Rohan, King Éomer greets them with great honor, and Merry stays with him until the king himself dies. Think of that. He leaves his own family to be with his dying friend, his shield brother, the last living link to the battle that made him who he was. He chose to be present for the end of an era in Rohan, rather than live out the end of his own era in the Shire. And when Éomer is gone, Merry's journey is still not over. He and Pippin travel on to Gondor, the great stone city he had last seen in the shadow of war, and there they live out their final years, guests of honor in the court of King Elessar, Aragorn himself. The text in the appendix is simple, almost stark, and when they died, they were laid in Rath Dinan, among the great of Gondor. Let that sink in. Meriadoc Brandybuck, of Buckland in the Shire, was not buried in the Brandybuck family tomb. He was laid to rest in the hallowed silent street of the kings and stewards of Gondor. His sarcophagus was placed next to the tomb of the great King Aragorn Elessar himself. It is an honor beyond imagining. A hobbit, buried among the mightiest men of the age. It is a testament to his heroism, to the greatness of his deeds. But it is also profoundly sad. He died a stranger, in a strange land, a celebrated, honored, and beloved stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. He chose to be buried, not with his ancestors, but with his comrades. He chose the identity of the soldier over the identity of the son, the husband, the father. His final resting place is a monument to his glory, but it's also a monument to his displacement. It tells the world that this hobbit, this small man from a quiet country, belonged more to the great tragic history of men than he did to his own people. This is the hidden tragedy of Merry's story. It's not a story of failure. It is a story of immense success, of a life lived to the fullest. But it is also a story of a profound and unending homesickness, not for the place he left, but for the place he could never truly return to, the past. He was homesick, for a moment in time. for a sense of purpose, for a brotherhood forged in fire. The Shire, for all its beauty and peace, could never give him that. It could give him comfort, but it could not give him meaning in the same way. And so, in the end, he went back. He went back to the world that had broken him and remade him. He went back to be near the memory of the king he had loved as a father. He chose to end his story not in the gentle green of the Shire, but in the cold, hallowed stone of Gondor, a place of kings and warriors, a place where Holdwine of the Riddermark belonged. The implications of this choice ripple outwards, touching on a deep and universal human truth. How many of us have an experience, a time in our lives that so profoundly shapes us that everything that comes after feels like an epilogue? It could be a war, as it was for Merry, but it could be anything. The intensity of first love, the all-consuming focus of raising a child, the years spent building a company from nothing, a period of intense travel and discovery, a time of great loss that redefines your entire world. We live through these moments, and they carve themselves into our souls, and then they end. We return to normal life. We go back to our jobs, our homes, our routines, and we try to integrate that transformative experience into the person we are now. But sometimes the fit is not quite right. A part of us remains over there, in that other time, that other life. We live in the present, but we are haunted by the ghosts of who we used to be. Merry's story is a profound meditation on this phenomenon. He is the archetype of the person who has two lives folded into one. The life before the war and the life after, and the life during the war, which becomes a kind of permanent internal landscape. He is a success in his post-war life. He is not a broken man, sitting in a tavern, endlessly retelling old stories. He channels his experience into scholarship, into leadership. He builds a good life. But the call of that other world, the world of oaths and kings and desperate courage, never fades. It is a low hum beneath the surface of his peaceful days. And when the opportunity arises to answer that call one last time, he takes it without hesitation. He understands on a level deeper than words that to be truly whole, he must honor both parts of himself. And if that means leaving the comfort of one home to die in the shadow of another, then that is the price of his integrity. This reframes his entire character. Merry is not just the clever hobbit or the cheerful adventurer. He is perhaps the most psychologically complex of the four. Frodo's trauma is explicit and mystical, tied to the supernatural evil of the ring. Sam's story is one of simple, powerful love and loyalty. Pippin, too, grows and becomes a great leader, but his connection to Gondor seems less all-consuming than Merry's to Rohan. He returns and fully re-inhabits his life as the Tyne. But Merry is caught in the middle. His wound is not a shard of Morgul blade, but a memory of love and duty so strong that it reorients his entire existence. He is a testament to the idea that the greatest adventures don't end when you come home. The journey to reconcile who you were with who you are is its own epic quest, fought not on battlefields, but in the quiet chambers of the heart over decades of peace. His final choice forces us to reconsider what we mean by a happy ending. Is a happy ending returning to a life of comfort and peace? For Sam it was, but for Merry perhaps a happy ending was the chance to be true to the most essential part of himself, even if it meant leaving that comfort behind. Perhaps happiness for him was not peace, but honor. The honor of being remembered as Holdwine, the honor of being with his king in memory and with his shield brother in his final days. The honor of being laid to rest, not as a master of a small country, but as a hero of the great kingdom of men. His ending is not tragic in the sense of failure, but it is deeply bittersweet. It is the story of a man who gained the whole world, but never stopped missing the one corner of it that had claimed his soul. He saved the Shire, but he belonged to Rohan. So we are left with this final, poignant image. Two small tombs in the great, silent city of the dead. Two hobbits lying in honor among kings and heroes, far, far from the green hills where they were born. Pippin is there beside his friend, a final act of fellowship. But it is Merry's journey that led them there. It was his divided heart, his unbreakable oath, his memory of a fallen king that charted this final, unexpected course. His story doesn't end with a quiet fading into the history of the Shire. It ends with a grand, somber, and deliberate final act, a choice to define his own legacy. He would be remembered not for the life he was born into, but for the one he earned. When we think of the hobbits, let us remember this. Frodo sailed, Sam stayed, and Merry went back. He went back to the place that haunted him, the place that made him, the place that called to him across 60 years of peace. He went back to answer for the oath he swore in the Golden Hall and to finally rest among the comrades he had found so far from home. His story is a quiet reminder that for some, the greatest war is not against an external foe, but against the division in one's own heart, and victory is not always a return to where you started, but a final, courageous journey to the place you truly belong. What does it say about a life when your final choice is not to be with your family, but to be laid to rest next to your king? It says that some oaths are written on the soul, and they last forever.